Recently, a new comment sent me back to a video that I made in 2018 where I outlined my entire wedding photography kit. I rewatched it and I had to just laugh to myself because in just 2 years' time, my career and kit has changed a lot. My lighting has mostly stayed the same, but my 2 cameras and every lens that I keep in my case is now different. So I thought I would update everyone on what I'm using, why I made the changes that I did, and share a couple instances where I feel it wasn't worth it. Now, I didn't make this video to gloat about how many lenses I have. I made it because regularly budding photographers often ask what camera or what lens I use, and I don't think my gear decision should be followed by anyone for a number of reasons. First, I am quite intense when it comes to a business pivot. When I switched from weddings to editorial work, I had no issue going all in on gear purchases that I felt would give me a slight edge in maximizing the opportunity. While it works for my tolerances, I think newer photographers should exercise more patience. Second, I've been a full-time photographer for a decade. My budget for gear is the result of a decade of accumulating equipment necessary to this career. Often when I buy something new, it's part of my annual budget for gear or other unused equipment was sold to fund it. Next, I'm always reducing the wallet damage of new gear by purchasing used. Out of every gear swap that I mentioned in this video, the only thing that I bought at full price is a Sony 135mm. I'll go over instances throughout this video, but I tend to make big purchases when I see a great buying opportunity, not when I first decide it would benefit me. Every lens I own I could sell today for roughly the same price that I bought it, so there's no significant loss of money when I buy and sell gear. Last and most important, because of YouTube and social media, I've been afforded luxuries that the typical professional photographer does not have. If I never started on YouTube, I wouldn't own so many Kodak strobes. I wouldn't have all the LED lights and audio equipment that I do, and I probably would sell all of the lenses that I don't use very often. However, for the sake of future comparisons and delivering more complete information on YouTube, I hold on to a lot more gear than I would if I was simply shooting for clients. A perfect example of this is the 80-1200 Pro. You may see me using it on Instagram, you may see me using it in videos, but all of this is to gain experience with the product and become informed to have future discussions on it. But the point that I made in my review still stands. It's not conducive to my work as a photographer, and I think there are other photographers it would better suit. I do my best to make these distinctions when I review products. I tell viewers when something isn't for me but might be more suited to a different photography niche. And I tell viewers when something I use might not be the best value to them. So for all these reasons, I hope you can understand that just because I share what I use to make a photo, it's not me recommending anyone to go out and purchase it. With all that being said, let's quickly revisit where I left off in my gear bag video from 2018. When I bought into Sony, I bought one A7R III and one A7 III. I bought the 12-24 f4, 24-70 2.8, 70-200mm 2.8, both G Masters, 50mm 1.8 and 85mm 1.8 FEs, and the Samyang 35mm f1.4. I held on to this exact setup for the first 6 months of shooting Sony. Things started to change in the fall of 2018. I had just locked down a new regular position shooting editorial and commercial work for a local university. By now, you guys have seen a lot of these shoots. Alex put me onto a used Zeiss 50mm f1.4, and I thought with this new position, I'd prefer to have a 50mm I enjoyed, as the 50mm f1.8 FE was just not a good lens. So I bought the Zeiss and it immediately became my most used lens. To this day, I shoot with my 50 for work more than 3 times as much as any other lens that I own. Next was the 85mm. 85 has historically been my most preferred focal length, and once I saw the difference in the Zeiss 50, I knew I wanted to upgrade the 85mm focal length too. So I ditched the 85 1.8 FE and bought Francisco's 85mm 1.4 G Master. I'll be honest, I could have done without this upgrade. It was not nearly as much of a difference as I experienced with the 50mm. Yes, the 85 G Master is better with a superior build quality and it does go down to 1.4, but I'd be totally fine using the 1.8 to this day. A few months passed and work had become really demanding. I was extremely proud of the new work that I was producing, and I was thirsty to get the best image quality possible. At that time, a photographer switching away from Sony listed a ton of lenses online, and I jumped on both his 35mm Zeiss and Sigma 105mm f1.4. The 35mm Zeiss was again a solid upgrade over the Samyang. They are equally sharp and fast, but the Zeiss has better character in its rendering, especially with how it handles flaring, and the build quality is undoubtedly better as well. The Sigma 105mm 1.4 on the other hand just doesn't do it for me. Its bulk doesn't feel worth its benefit, it's slower and less accurate at focusing than any of the G Master or Zeiss lenses that I own, and every time I pick it up I can instantly feel the fact that I am using a third-party lens. The 105 gets used the least out of all my lenses, and it rarely even makes the cut to be in my bag. Now we get to 2019. My wedding photography work has decreased and I'm entirely focused on editorial and commercial work. My two most commonly used lenses as a wedding photographer were the 35mm and 85mm, but with this continued love for the Zeiss 50mm, I found I was using 35 and 85 way less. Around this time, Sony released new G Master lenses in the 24mm f1.4 and the 35mm f1.8. I tried both extensively and ultimately decided that they will give me more variety away from the 50mm. I've been absolutely thrilled with these two purchases, and nowadays I feel more confident than ever with just the 24mm G Master, 50mm Zeiss, and 135mm G Master. And it's not uncommon for those to be the only three lenses that I'm even taking with me to a shoot. With this decrease in weddings, I rarely use any of my three zoom lenses. They spend most of their time in a cabinet. I don't even break them out unless I'm shooting some type of event coverage and need rapid reach. I go for the rest of 2019 and into 2020 without any more changes. And then spring of 2020 rolls around and a used Sony a7R IV appears on my radar for a very low price. I have a very valid case for the megapixels as we are regularly cropping heavily and printing large at the university, so I buy it and eventually sell my a7 III to offset the cost. Shortly after that, I hear rumblings of the new Sigma 24-70mm 2.8DN being better than the Sony G Master, so I try it out and decide to keep the Sigma and ditch the Sony G Master. This made a lot of sense to me because I'm not using the 24-70 very often, and now I can decrease my investment in that focal length while also upgrading. Okay, so we've got to be done, right? Well, I thought I was, but I recently had an opportunity to photograph a wakeboarder and found that 200mm just doesn't cut it. And after photographing that wakeboarder, I was reminded of the place I've always wanted photography to take me. I'm reminded that more than anything else, I'd like to capture adventure and action sports for a living. Just in the last 2 weeks, I said, screw it. And I bought a Sony A9 and a 100 to 400mm lens so that I could get more reach in the action sports that I'm trying to focus more on. And to fund the A9, I sold off my a7R III, which was the first Sony product that I purchased to even start this entire switch from Nikon to Sony. And that is how, in 2 years' time, I purchased 8 new lenses and 2 new camera bodies, all without ever changing camera brands. So if you're looking at my kit.co page, which apparently gets like 500 hits a day, or you see what I'm using in the details of an Instagram post, please don't take that as a suggestion that you should have the same gear. In all of my videos, I give you differences that are rooted in math and practicality. That is so you can make your own informed decisions on how to spend your money. More than ever, photographer is an extremely difficult career to make profitable for the time and resources that one commits to the craft. Be thoughtful and patient with your purchases, regardless of how you see others behave. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time, keep on shooting.